The mop hit marble with a flat, echoing crack that carried farther than it should have. It landed at Amina's feet. Celestine stood in the center of the living room, tall and composed, holding herself like the chandelier above her ornamental, unbending, certain of her own reflection. The chandelier scattered light across the marble floors in sharp fragments. 12 rooms, curved staircase, east wing stretching quiet and pale beyond the archway. "Since you insist on being in this house," Celestine said, her voice smooth and carrying. No one moved. Dion lifted his glass. Trice's thumb kept scrolling across her phone. Two cousins stared at nothing in particular. The air felt upholstered in comfort, their comfort. Jakari sat nearest the window. His phone tilted slightly away from Amina. His jaw shifted once, as if he might speak. He did not. Amina looked at the mop. The handle rested against the marble like a verdict. She set the tray of glasses down on the side table. Glass touched wood with a quiet click. The sound was small, but in the silence it felt deliberate. If justice stories are your thing, hit subscribe. We dive in now. She bent. The marble was cool through the thin fabric at her knees. She wrapped her fingers around the handle. The cleaning solution in the bucket beside her carried a sharp citrus scent that stung faint cracks in her skin. From the staircase, silk whispered against wood. Monique appeared at the landing, one hand grazing the banister, cream robe, bare collarbone, hair loose, falling over her shoulders as if the house had always framed her. "Start with the bathroom," Monique called down without raising her voice. "And use the good towels to dry the floors. I don't like streaks." She did not wait for acknowledgement. She turned and disappeared into the guest suite. A low laugh slipped from Dion's throat. Not loud, not joyful, just sharp enough to cut. Amina dipped the mop into the bucket. The water rippled, cloudy and pale. She wrung it out slowly. Her wrists ached from the pressure. The skin across her knuckles was already dry from the afternoon. She moved toward the east wing. The hallway lights hummed faintly overhead. Each stroke of the mop left a dull sheen across the marble. The scent of cleaner followed her, thin and sterile. Her knees pressed against the floor again. Cool, hard, unforgiving. Footsteps approached behind her. Celestine walked past without slowing. A crystal glass sat on the hallway table. As she passed, her hand brushed it, not clumsy, not accidental. The glass tipped. Water spilled across the floor Amina had just cleaned, spreading in a pale arc that caught the light. Celestine glanced down, then at Amina. "You missed a spot." She kept walking. The water crept toward the baseboard. Amina watched it for a breath. Then she reached for the mop again. Her movements were steady, precise. No tremor, no rush. The house absorbed the quiet. Heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Jakari. He walked toward her dressed in a fresh shirt, carrying 2 glasses. Ice clinked softly against glass. Amber liquid caught the hallway light. Amina looked up as he approached. The mop paused mid-stroke. He did not slow down. He stepped over her outstretched arm the way someone steps over a forgotten object. Careless, practiced. The guest suite door opened before he knocked twice. A sliver of warm lamplight spilled into the hallway. Then the door closed with a soft latch. The air shifted. For 3 seconds, Amina looked at the closed door. 1, 2, 3. Then she lowered her gaze back to the baseboard and kept scrubbing. Her phone vibrated against her hip inside the apron pocket. She did not reach for it. The vibration stopped, then started again. A thin mechanical insistence against her skin. She kept working. 4 hours passed in the measured rhythm of rinse, wring, press, glide. The marble lost its streaks. The bathroom tiles shone. The hallway reflected the overhead lights in clean lines. Her knees burned. The skin at the base of her palms had turned raw, where the handle rubbed. The scent of cleaning solution clung to her hair. In the small sitting room off the east corridor, her phone vibrated once more. She stood slowly this time. The motion sent a dull ache up her legs. She stepped into the back hallway, away from the view of the living room, away from the hum of conversation and low laughter. The hallway was dim. The hum of the air system whispered through the vents. She pulled the phone from her pocket. Unknown number. A message preview glowed across the screen. Miss Amina, my name is Mr. Harland. I am the estate attorney for your father, Cornelius. Please contact us at your earliest convenience regarding a matter of significant urgency. The words did not move. They simply existed. She read them once. Then again, down the hall, someone laughed. Ice clinked in glass. He does not know the mansion has been in her name since the week after the wedding. Amina silenced the phone. She slipped it back into her pocket. Then she returned to the east wing and finished cleaning the room that already belonged to her. The house did not quiet after she finished. Laughter moved through the living room in soft waves. Ice struck glass. A heel tapped once against marble. Somewhere in the east wing, a door closed and opened again. Amina rinsed the mop head one final time. The water in the bucket had turned cloudy gray. She wrung it out slowly, twisted until her wrists trembled, then leaned the handle against the wall inside the utility closet. The air in there smelled faintly of bleach and warm wiring. She removed her gloves. The skin beneath was pale and creased, fingertips roughened from chemical sting. A thin line had split along her knuckle. She pressed her thumb over it without thinking. Her phone rested against her hip, heavier now. She stepped into the narrow back hallway and closed the closet door behind her. The click of the latch sealed off the hum of conversation from the front of the house. The hallway light flickered once before steadying. She pulled the phone out again. The message remained on the screen. Unchanged. Miss Amina, my name is Mr. Harland. I am the estate attorney for your father, Cornelius. Please contact us at your earliest convenience regarding a matter of significant urgency. Her father never used urgency unless it mattered. She stared at the name for a long moment. Cornelius. The word carried porch light and quiet evenings and the low scrape of a wooden chair across concrete. It carried the smell of coffee at dawn and the steady rhythm of a man who never hurried unless something was broken. Her thumb hovered over the number. From the other side of the wall, a burst of laughter rose and fell. A woman's voice, Monique's, bright and assured. Jakari's tone followed, warmer than it had been in months. Amina lowered the phone. Not here. Not like this. She slipped it back into her apron pocket and walked to the small bedroom at the rear of the house, the one near the utility area. The door frame had a faint scratch near the hinge where furniture had once scraped past it. The room smelled faintly of dust and detergent. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. The gold pendant lay cool against her collarbone. She lifted it between her fingers, thumb brushing along the thin ridge of the key's stem. Her phone vibrated again. This time, it was a call. The screen glowed in the dim room. The same number. She let it ring once. Twice. On the third ring, she answered. Hello. Her voice was steady, barely above a murmur. Miss Amina, the man on the other end said, tone measured, careful. This is Thomas Harland. I apologize for the timing. The house laughed again beyond the thin wall. I received your message, she said. There was a brief pause. The faint rustle of paper on the other end. I regret to inform you, he continued, that your father passed away 6 days ago. He passed quietly at home. The air in the small room shifted, not violently, not dramatically, just enough to feel different. Amina did not speak. She lowered herself slowly to sit on the floor, back resting against the side of the bed. The cool tile seeped through her skirt. Her knees protested the bend. "I attempted to reach you earlier in the week," Mr. Harland said gently. "There are matters requiring your immediate attention." Her fingers tightened around the pendant. The house beyond the wall erupted briefly. Someone raising a toast. Glass tapping glass. A soft cheer. "I understand," she said. "There are documents that were executed some time ago," he continued. "Protective transfers. Updated estate instructions." Her pulse slowed instead of quickened. "Specifically," he said, "the Atlanta residential property in which you currently reside was transferred into your sole name 1 week following your wedding." Silence filled the small room. The deed stamp reads, "Fulton County filed at 9:42 in the morning, 7 days after the ceremony." Mr. Harlan's voice remained even, precise. "Additionally, as the sole heir of the Cornelius estate, you are now entitled to 43 commercial properties, 11 residential complexes, development rights across 6 states, and associated financial accounts." He paused. "The total appraised value of the estate is approximately $28 billion. The number did not echo. It simply settled. Amina closed her eyes briefly. She did not cry. Grief had already been moving quietly through her from the first missed call, from the moment the message carried her father's name into this house. "What do you require of me?" she asked. "Several documents require acknowledgement," he replied. "We can arrange a secure review at your convenience. Given the circumstances, I would advise discretion until you determine how you wish to proceed." Through the wall, a door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed overhead. The chandelier in the front hall hummed faintly under its weight of light. Amina looked around the small room, the narrow bed, the faint crack in the ceiling near the vent, the single lamp casting a soft yellow circle against the wall. This house, her house. If she stays silent now, she keeps everything. If she stays silent forever, she loses herself. She pressed the pendant flat against her chest. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. There was no tremor in her voice. On the other end, paper shifted again. "Of course," Mr. Harland replied. "We will proceed according to your instruction." She ended the call. The screen went dark in her hand. For a long moment, she remained seated on the floor, listening to the distant sounds of a house rearranging itself around assumptions that no longer held. Ice clinked again. Someone laughed. Amina rose slowly, placed the phone on the small bedside table, and lay back on the narrow bed. She stared at the ceiling where the paint met the molding in a thin, uneven line. 2 weeks. The house was loud. Inside her, something had gone completely still. Betrayal had not arrived with a single moment anyone could point to. It had not exploded. It had settled. Like dust that gathers so gradually, you only notice it when you run your hand across the surface, and it comes away gray. The early months of the marriage had been bright in the way new things are bright. Dinners out, late conversations, shared plans spoken over kitchen counters, still smelling faintly of fresh paint and polished wood. Jakari had laughed easily then. He had introduced her to people with a hand at the small of her back, proud and animated, but brightness can thin. Celestine began visiting more frequently around the end of the 2nd year. She never arrived unannounced. She arrived precisely when Jakari was already uncertain about something, a stalled deal, a disagreement at work, a night when Amina had chosen quiet over argument. She never criticized Amina directly in front of others. She preferred hallways, kitchen corners, phone calls that stretched too long. "She's distant," Celestine would say, her voice low, almost concerned. "A wife should be warmer." Or later, When Amina left a room rather than escalate a disagreement, Celestine would tilt her head and murmur, "Silence can be a kind of disrespect, you know." She planted sentences the way gardeners plant seeds, small, deliberate, spaced far enough apart that they didn't look like a pattern. Jakari listened. At first, he defended gently. "She's just reserved." But doubt does not need volume. It needs repetition. By the third year, he had stopped correcting his mother. He began nodding instead. Not decisively, just enough. Monique entered quietly. She came through a colleague, a dinner invitation, a shared event, a second meeting that turned into a third. She studied rooms the way some people study maps. She learned what Jakari leaned toward: admiration, affirmation, easy laughter at the right moment. Where Amina paused before speaking, Monique filled silence immediately. Where Amina measured her words, Monique sharpened hers. "She doesn't fight for you," Monique once said softly, her tone thoughtful rather than accusatory. "A woman who cares makes noise." Jakari had stared at his drink, the amber surface reflecting the overhead light. "Sometimes quiet means she doesn't think you're worth the effort," Monique added. It was a small sentence. It lodged. Meanwhile, Amina continued moving through rooms with the same contained steadiness she had always carried. She did not argue loudly when voices rose around her. She did not defend herself against insinuations thrown indirectly across tables. She listened. She absorbed. She chose her words sparingly. That restraint, once admired, became suspect. At family dinners, seating arrangements shifted almost imperceptibly. Celestine and Jakari closer together, Amina farther down the table, a cousin occupying the chair that had once been hers. The chandelier light glinted off polished silverware. Wine poured. Conversations layered over one another. "She's so contained," Celestine would say to no one in particular, though the comment always found its mark. Amina would lift her glass. "Take a sip." Set it down gently. Across the table, Dion began speaking in hypotheticals. "You know, if someone isn't contributing the right energy to a household, sometimes it's better to restructure." He said it while cutting into his steak, eyes on his plate. No one asked what he meant. No one needed to. The house itself seemed to shift in allegiance. Monique began leaving personal items on the marble counters, a silk scarf draped over the back of a chair, perfume bottles on a vanity, a pair of heels aligned neatly beside the master bedroom door. Objects mark territory before words do. Amina noticed each one. She did not move them. The guest suite door began closing later at night. The soft click of the latch traveled farther down the hall than it should have. Laughter behind that door took on a tone that was no longer discreet. One evening, standing at the kitchen sink, Amina overheard Celestine's voice drifting from the living room. "She's too quiet," Celestine said. "It's unnatural. Women who say little are always thinking something." The cousins chuckled softly. Amina's hands rested in warm dishwater. The scent of lemon soap rose in faint steam. Outside the window, the iron gate stood dark against the streetlights beyond. She dried her hands slowly. In another room, Monique's voice floated up, bright and confident. "You deserve someone who matches you," she said. "Matches you." As if compatibility were volume. As if depth required spectacle. Jakari began spending less time in shared spaces and more in rooms that closed. When he did speak to Amina, it was often in conclusions already reached. "We need different energy," he said once, pacing near the staircase. "You don't fight for us." The chandelier light caught in his watch as he gestured. Amina watched him. "I don't perform for rooms," she replied quietly. He exhaled sharply, as though that were proof of something. Silence became evidence against her. By the time the dinner announcement came, the decision about bedrooms spoken casually over plated food and polished silver. The erosion had already done its work. The shift did not surprise her. It clarified. In the days that followed, she stopped correcting assumptions. She stopped stepping into conversations where her presence felt conditional. She moved through the house with a different quiet, not smaller, but sealed. They saw withdrawal. They mistook it for surrender. They did not recognize measurement. In the evenings, when the house settled and footsteps slowed, she would stand briefly at the end of the hallway and look toward the master bedroom door, now claimed by someone else. Her hand would rise unconsciously to the small gold key resting against her skin. She did not grip it tightly. She simply felt its weight. Dust settles slowly, so does resolve, and by the time anyone notices the ground has shifted, the foundation beneath them has already changed. The announcement came in the middle of passing the salt. The dining room glowed under warm chandelier light, plates arranged with deliberate care, wine breathing in tall glasses. The marble floors beyond the archway reflected a softened gold. Jakari sat at the head of the table. He waited until forks had lifted, until conversation had settled into that comfortable rhythm that assumes nothing disruptive is coming. Monique will be moving into the master bedroom, he said, tone measured, almost administrative. Starting tonight. The words landed without echo. Celestine lifted her wine and took a slow sip, eyes forward. Dion nodded once, subtle and approving. Trice adjusted her napkin on her lap. No one asked a question. And Amina, Jakari continued, still not looking at her. You'll take the smaller room near the utility area in the east wing. It makes more sense that way. Makes more sense. The silverware chimed faintly against porcelain as someone resumed cutting their food. Amina set her fork down. The sound was quiet but precise. She looked across the length of the table at her husband. His gaze remained fixed on his plate, as if reading from something already decided. The air felt dense, not tense, settled. Her fingers brushed lightly against the small gold pendant resting at her collarbone. The metal had warmed against her skin. For a moment, the room narrowed to the soft hum of overhead lights and the faint scent of rosemary rising from the roasted vegetables on her plate. She stood. The chair legs slid softly across the polished floor. No one stopped eating. She carried her plate to the kitchen. The door swung shut behind her with a muted click, sealing off the dining room's low murmur. The kitchen light was cooler, brighter, less forgiving. She placed the plate into the sink and turned on the faucet. Water rushed over porcelain, washing away food she no longer tasted. Outside the window, the backyard stretched into darkness. The iron fence traced a clean line at the property's edge. Beyond it, distant city lights flickered steady and indifferent. She stood there, hands braced on the edge of the sink. The faucet ran. In the dining room, laughter resumed softer now. Amina turned the water off. The sudden quiet in the kitchen rang louder than the sound had. She let out one slow breath. It left her in a thin, controlled stream. A single tear slid down her cheek. It did not shake. It did not multiply. It fell quietly onto the tile and disappeared. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the motion small and efficient. When she returned to the dining room, the conversation had shifted to weekend plans. Wine was being poured again. Monique leaned slightly toward Jakari, her hand resting casually near his sleeve. She did not look at Amina as she took her seat. The master bedroom door stood open at the end of the hallway, visible from where Amina sat. Inside, soft lamplight glowed against silk sheets and arranged pillows. Territory marked. The evening unfolded as if nothing irrevocable had been spoken. Later, when the plates were cleared and chairs pushed back, Celestine rose and adjusted her shawl. "It's important for everyone to know their place," she said lightly, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. "Harmony depends on it." Her gaze passed over Amina briefly, not lingering long enough to appear deliberate. Upstairs, footsteps moved across the master suite floor. Drawers opened, closed, the faint thud of luggage against carpet. In the east wing, the smaller bedroom waited narrow bed, single lamp, closet barely deep enough for 2 rows of hangers. Amina entered it without ceremony. She placed her folded clothing into the closet with careful alignment, shoes side by side beneath the rack, a book on the nightstand. The walls were painted a neutral cream. A faint hairline crack ran along one corner near the ceiling. She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. From down the hallway came the low murmur of voices and the distinct click of a door closing firm. Assured, she did not look toward it. Her fingers traced the edge of the pendant again. Years ago, her father had fastened it around her neck himself, his hand steady, his voice calm. "This is not jewelry. This is a reminder. Every door you ever need, you already hold the key." She had worn it through every season since, through college lectures and early career fundraisers. Through the night, she met Jakari in a room filled with donors and soft jazz. Through vows spoken under white flowers and camera flashes, through 3 years of slow erosion. Now it rested against her collarbone in a house that had quietly shifted around her. She leaned back onto the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Upstairs, a burst of laughter rang out bright and close. She closed her eyes. They thought the change in rooms marked a change in power. They thought proximity defined position. They thought a master suite conferred ownership. The house settled around them all. In the darkness of the east wing, Amina lay still, not broken, not stunned. Still, something inside her had already moved beyond argument. And in that small room near the utility area, under a ceiling that needed repainting and walls that carried no prestige, a decision began to take shape, quiet and complete. The kind of decision that does not announce itself, the kind that waits and watches and chooses its moment. The second call came 4 days after the dinner. It was late afternoon. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a morning argument no one wants to revisit. Sunlight cut through the narrow utility room window in a pale rectangle across the tiled floor. Amina stood inside the small room with the door pulled nearly shut. Shelves lined the wall, folded towels, cleaning supplies, a plastic bin labeled in careful handwriting. The hum of the washer filled the space with a low mechanical rhythm. Her phone vibrated in her hand. "Thomas Harland," she answered on the first ring. "Miss Amina," he said, voice steady, practiced. "Thank you for returning my call earlier this week. I appreciate your discretion." The washer clicked into a higher spin cycle. Water churned inside metal. "I'm ready," she said. There was a pause, papers shifting faintly on the other end. "As previously mentioned," he began, "your father executed several protective transfers following your wedding. The Atlanta residential property is registered solely in your name. This includes all structures, outbuildings, and adjoining acreage." The sunlight shifted slightly across the floor. "Additionally," he continued, "upon settlement of the estate, all assets have transferred directly to you. 43 commercial properties, 11 residential complexes, development rights across 6 states. Associated financial holdings." He spoke each category evenly, without flourish. "The total appraised value stands at approximately $28 billion. The number did not feel heavy. It felt exact. Amina lowered herself slowly to the floor, back resting against the washing machine. The vibration pressed faintly against her shoulder blades. In the hallway, beyond the thin door, Footsteps passed. Someone's voice carried briefly, indistinct, then faded. She closed her eyes. Was it sudden? She asked quietly. Yes, Mr. Harland replied. He passed peacefully at home in the evening. Evening. She pictured the porch in Charlotte, the worn wooden boards, the low hum of cicadas in summer. Her father seated in his usual chair, with his hands resting loosely on the armrests. She imagined the light dimming gradually, not abruptly. I have prepared certified copies of the deeds and trust documents, Mr. Harland said. They are time-stamped and notarized. We can arrange a secure review. I would advise that you do not disclose this information until you are prepared to act. The washer slowed, then stopped. Silence settled thick in the small room. I understand, she said. There was another brief pause. Miss Amina, he added, tone gentler now. Your father was very clear in his instructions. He wanted you protected. Entirely. Protected. The word did not sting. It steadied. She reached up and closed her fingers around the gold pendant at her throat. The metal felt warmer than the room. He said, Mr. Harland continued carefully, that you would know what to do when the time came. Amina's hand tightened. The memory surfaced uninvited, her father standing in the doorway the morning she left for college, fastening the pendant around her neck. His voice low, unhurried. Every door you ever need, you already hold the key. The washing machine clicked once more as it powered down completely. In the distance, a door upstairs closed. A faint laugh followed, brief, careless. What is required of me immediately? She asked. Signatures acknowledging receipt, he replied. We can courier documents under seal. For now, nothing changes publicly unless you decide it does. Nothing changes publicly. The house beyond the utility room felt suddenly smaller, like a structure viewed from a height. I will need 2 weeks, she said. There was no hesitation in her tone. 2 weeks, Mr. Harland repeated. Understood. We proceed quietly, she added. Of course. She ended the call. The screen went dark in her hand. For a moment, she remained seated on the floor, the hum of the house filtering faintly through the walls, the refrigerator's low vibration, the distant murmur of conversation, the subtle creak of someone crossing the upstairs hallway. Her father was gone. The knowledge did not strike like lightning. It moved through her slowly, deliberate, as everything he had ever done. She did not weep. Grief was already working inside her in layers too deep for display. She leaned her head back against the cool metal of the washing machine and let her breath settle into an even rhythm. Upstairs, footsteps crossed the master suite, the faint scrape of a chair against hardwood, a door closing again. This house, her house. The irony did not make her smile. It clarified. She rose slowly from the floor. Her knees protested, a dull ache from days of strain. She brushed invisible lint from her skirt and adjusted the pendant against her collarbone. In the hallway, Celestine's voice floated down the staircase, speaking into a phone. We're planning something special next weekend, she was saying. A celebration. A new chapter. The phrase hung in the air. Amina stepped out of the utility room and closed the door behind her with quiet precision. A new chapter. Yes. She moved down the hallway without urgency, passing framed photographs arranged in symmetrical order. Weddings. Holidays. Curated smiles. No one looked up as she crossed the living room. Jakari stood near the bar cart, swirling amber liquid in a glass. Monique leaned close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Their conversation did not pause when Amina entered. She walked past them. Her steps were even. In 2 weeks, the papers would be in place. The documents acknowledged. The chain complete. In 2 weeks, the celebration would unfold exactly as planned. And in that same room, under the same chandelier light, truth would stand without raising its voice. She did not plan revenge. She planned clarity. And clarity, in the hands of a patient woman, is irreversible. The house brightened in the days that followed, not in warmth, in activity. Celestine moved through rooms with a clipboard she did not need, issuing small refinements to caterers over the phone. Her voice carried from one hallway to the next, decisive, satisfied. "White orchids, not lilies. We want clean lines," she instructed one afternoon, pacing near the staircase. "And polish the silver again. I don't want fingerprints." Monique took control of the guest list. She stood at the kitchen island with a tablet propped against a glass of sparkling water, manicured finger-tapping names into place. "Keep it selective," she said lightly to Jakari. "We want the right energy." He nodded, leaning against the counter, adjusting his cufflinks, as if the event had already begun. The chandelier was cleaned twice. The marble floors were buffed until the reflection of the ceiling lights sharpened into almost perfect mirrors. In the east wing, Amina closed her bedroom door and sat at the small desk by the window. A courier had arrived that morning at precisely 10:12. The man wore a dark suit and spoke only when necessary. "Signature required," he said, placing a sealed leather portfolio on the desk. The envelope bore embossed lettering. She signed once on the digital pad. The device emitted a soft confirmation tone, time-stamped automatically. 10:13 in the morning. Chain of custody acknowledged. The courier left without lingering. Now the leather folder lay open in front of her. Inside, documents rested in clean order, each page marked with official seals and notary stamps pressed into the lower right corner. Fulton County. Filed at 9:42 in the morning. 7 days after the ceremony, she traced the edge of the embossed seal with the tip of her finger. Not to admire it, but to confirm its weight. 47,000 square feet. All outbuildings. All adjoining land. Sole ownership. The language was clinical. Exact. She turned the page. Trust instructions. Asset breakdown. Commercial holdings listed in precise columns. 43 properties. 11 residential complexes. Development rights in 6 states. $28 billion. The numbers sat quietly on white paper. Outside her door, laughter rose again from the living room as samples from the catering company were delivered for tasting. The faint scent of roasted garlic and wine drifted down the hallway. "Saturday will be perfect," Monique's voice carried. "It's time we celebrate properly." Amina closed the folder gently. She did not rush. She reached for a second envelope resting beside it. Acknowledgement forms requiring her signature to finalize internal transfers and confirm estate control. She read each line carefully. Her father had taught her to read contracts before she was 10. Not because he expected her to follow him into business, but because he believed clarity was protection. She signed where necessary. Each signature was neat, deliberate, time stamped again. 10:36 in the morning. Another confirmation tone. She placed the documents back into the portfolio and sealed it with the adhesive strip provided. The act felt less like secrecy and more like completion. The phone on her desk vibrated. "Thomas Harland," she answered immediately. "Documents received?" he asked. "Yes. Everything aligns with your instruction. The estate has fully transitioned. We are prepared for any public clarification you wish to make." She looked toward the closed door of her small room. Beyond it, footsteps crossed the marble hallway. "Saturday evening," she said. There was a brief pause. "The gathering?" he asked. "Yes. We will attend discreetly," he replied. "My associates and I will arrive shortly after you do." certified copies in hand. She imagined the ballroom filled with conversation, crystal glasses catching light, her husband's hand resting confidently at someone else's waist. 30 seconds after me, she said. Understood. She ended the call. For a moment, she remained seated at the desk. If she walked away quietly, she would retain everything. If she remained silent forever, she would lose herself. The difference between those two outcomes no longer frightened her. It clarified her timeline. Outside, Celestine's voice rose again. Has anyone confirmed the photographer? She asked sharply. I want documentation. Amina almost smiled. Documentation. She stood and moved to the closet. Her clothing hung in measured rows, neutral tones, structured lines, garments chosen for function rather than spectacle. She selected an ivory dress and laid it across the bed. The fabric caught the afternoon light in soft folds. She touched the pendant at her throat, not jewelry, a reminder. In the hallway, Jakari's voice joined the chorus of preparation. We'll call it a new chapter, he said. A fresh start. The phrase drifted under her door. Amina stepped toward the mirror. Her reflection met her calmly, not wounded, not triumphant, clear. The house buzzed with expectation. Florists would arrive tomorrow morning, caterers again on Friday. Saturday evening, the marble would gleam beneath polished shoes. The chandelier would scatter light across carefully curated smiles. She closed her bedroom door behind her and locked it softly. The click was quiet but decisive. Saturday was coming, and for the first time in weeks, the silence inside her did not feel like endurance. It felt like timing. Saturday arrived dressed in excess. By early evening, the driveway curved under a procession of headlights. Luxury sedans rolled through the iron gates in quiet succession, tires whispering over smooth pavement. Valets in dark jackets moved efficiently, doors opening, closing, engines silencing one by one. Inside, the chandelier burned brighter than usual. White orchids framed the entryway in sculpted arrangements. Silver trays floated between clusters of guests carrying champagne flutes that caught the light like glass bells. Laughter rose and fell in measured crescendos. Music threaded through the rooms. Low, controlled, curated. Jakari stood near the center of the ballroom, posture relaxed, smile calibrated, a tailored suit, a glass balanced between two fingers. He leaned toward guests as they approached, greeting them with the confidence of someone certain of his footing. Monique remained at his side in a red dress that drew the eye without asking. She moved with practiced ease, laughing at the right moments, touching elbows lightly, guiding conversations back toward Jakari when they drifted. Celestine drifted through the room like a conductor, correcting minor details with a raised brow or subtle hand gesture. Keep the bar stocked, she murmured to a server passing by, and dim the lights just slightly. We want warmth. Dion laughed too loudly near the far wall, recounting an exaggerated anecdote. Trice accepted compliments near the window, chin lifted, posture deliberate. The house had never looked more certain of itself. Amina arrived 20 minutes after the first wave of guests had settled. The front door opened without announcement. Conversations did not stop all at once. They paused in increments first, those nearest the entrance. Then, outward, in a subtle ripple, she stepped inside wearing the ivory dress she had laid out days earlier. Structured, clean, no embellishment. Her hair pulled back simply, revealing the quiet line of her jaw. The gold pendant rested against her collarbone. She did not rush. Her heels moved across the marble with a steady rhythm, unhurried, each step landing precisely within the light cast by the chandelier. A server nearly collided with her, startled, then corrected his path. The air shifted. Jakari saw her from across the room. For a fraction of a second, surprise broke through his expression. It hardened quickly into something tighter. Irritation edged with confusion. He handed his glass to a passing waiter and began moving toward her. Monique's eyes followed him, narrowing almost imperceptibly. She adjusted her posture and crossed the room as well, determined to intercept. Celestine noticed next. Her chin lifted slightly. A thin line formed between her brows. Amina reached the center of the ballroom and stopped. She did not claim space loudly. She occupied it. Monique arrived first, smile fixed. "I didn't realize this was your kind of evening," she said lightly, her tone designed for public consumption. "No one sent you an invitation." Her words carried just enough volume to draw attention from those nearest. Amina looked at her steadily. "I don't need an invitation," she replied calmly. "To my own property." The sentence did not rise. It landed. A few guests glanced at one another, uncertain whether they had heard correctly. Jakari reached them then. "Amina," he said sharply under his breath, forcing composure. "This isn't the time." "For what?" she asked quietly. "For whatever this is," he replied, gesturing vaguely at the air between them. The front door opened again. The sound cut cleanly through the music. Thomas Harland entered in a dark suit, silver hair neatly combed, carrying a slim leather folder. Two associates followed a few steps behind him, their expressions professional, contained. They did not linger near the entrance. They walked directly toward Amina. Conversations thinned. Music seemed suddenly too loud, then too quiet. Mr. Harland stopped just behind her right shoulder. "Good evening," he said, voice clear but not raised. "Miss Amina?" Several heads turned fully now. Jakari's gaze flicked from Amina to the attorney and back again. "What is this?" he demanded softly. Mr. Harland opened the leather folder with deliberate care. Paper slid against paper in a crisp, unmistakable sound. He stepped toward the central table beneath the chandelier and placed the documents down in a neat row, stamped, notarized, embossed seals catching the overhead light. "This gathering provides an efficient opportunity," Mr. Harland began evenly, "to clarify certain matters of record." Guests edged closer without appearing to. Celestine took a step forward. "What matters?" she asked, voice controlled but sharpened. "Mr. Harland did not look at her. "The Atlanta residential property," he said, touching the top document lightly, "including all structures and adjoining land, was transferred into the sole name of Miss Amina 1 week following her wedding." The room stilled. "The deed," he continued, "was filed with Fulton County at 9:42 in the morning, 7 days after the ceremony." A guest near the bar lowered his glass slowly. Jakari stared at the page as if it were written in another language. "That's not," he began, then stopped. Mr. Harland turned to the next document. "Furthermore, upon settlement of the estate of Cornelius," he said, voice steady, "all assets, comprising 43 commercial properties, 11 residential complexes, development rights across 6 states, and associated financial holdings, have transferred solely to Miss Amina." The chandelier hummed faintly above them. "Total appraised value," he finished, "approximately $28 billion." No one spoke. Monique's hand slipped from Jakari's sleeve. Dion's laughter died mid-breath across the room. Trice's posture shifted back half a step, without conscious intention. Amina remained still. She looked directly at Jakari. "You handed me a mop," she said, voice even, carrying without strain. She paused, allowing the silence to stretch. "I used it." Her gaze did not waver. "Now I'm asking you to leave." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. The chandelier's light caught briefly on the gold key at her throat as she turned slightly, stepping back from the table of documents. Around her, the celebration faltered, conversations collapsing into whispers, glasses lowered, certainty dissolving under the weight of ink and seal. Saturday had arrived exactly on time. No one reached for a glass. No one reached for the music. The chandelier continued to burn overhead, indifferent, scattering light across faces that had gone still. Thomas Harland adjusted the documents with measured precision, aligning the corners as if neatness itself were a form of mercy. Certified copies, he said evenly. Filed and recorded. Public record. The words settled heavier than the number had. Jakari stepped forward, his hand hovering over the top page without touching it. "This has to be a misunderstanding," he said, voice tight but controlled. "There are shared assets, joint accounts." Mr. Harlan's gaze did not shift. "There are none," he replied. "Your name does not appear on the deed, nor within the trust documents. The transfer was executed prior to any joint consolidation." The soft hum of the air system filled the silence between sentences. Celestine's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. The crystal trembled slightly, catching light in fractured flashes. "You expect us to believe," she said carefully, "that this entire property has belonged to her the entire time?" "Yes, Mr. Well," Harland answered. He slid one document forward. The embossed seal caught the chandelier's glow. The raised ink was unmistakable beneath the clear protective sleeve. Fulton County. Filed at 9:42 in the morning. 7 days after the ceremony. A guest leaned closer, squinting at the stamp. "That's legitimate," the man murmured under his breath. Dion exhaled sharply, a sound caught somewhere between disbelief and recalculation. Monique's posture had shifted subtly. Her chin remained lifted, but the angle had changed. She was no longer standing beside Jakari. She stood slightly apart. Jakari looked at Amina again, truly looked this time. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked, the question thin and late. Amina's expression did not harden. "There was nothing to tell," she said quietly. "It was always clear." The sentence landed with a calm finality. Mr. Harland turned another page. "Additionally," he continued, "all commercial holdings, residential complexes, and development rights have transferred into Miss Amina's sole control. The transition was finalized 6 days ago." A faint ripple moved through the room. 6 days. Several guests exchanged glances. "So this event," one woman near the bar whispered, "is being held on property she owns?" "Yes," Mr. Harland said. The word cut cleaner than any argument. Jakari's jaw tightened. "You can't just walk in and humiliate us like this," he said, anger breaking through composure. "There are guests here." Amina's gaze did not leave his. "You made it public," she replied. There was no heat in her tone, only alignment. Celestine finally set her wine glass down. The base struck the table with a sharper sound than intended. "This is manipulation," she snapped. "You waited. You plotted." Amina tilted her head slightly. "I asked for time," she said. "I took it." Mr. Harland closed the leather folder halfway, leaving the documents visible. "As of this evening," he added, "all occupancy of this property is subject to Miss Amina's discretion. Formal notice will be delivered in writing." The word notice carried weight. A server near the doorway shifted his stance, unsure whether to continue circulating with the tray in his hands. Monique stepped back, another half step. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, then to Jakari, calculating. Jakari ran a hand through his hair, the motion unsteady now. "This is still my home," he insisted, though the sentence sounded less certain than before. Amina looked around the room slowly. the orchids, the polished silver, the guests standing in suspended discomfort. She met his eyes again. "You handed me a mop," she said, voice level. In this house, the silence that followed felt deeper than before. "I used it," she repeated. "Now, I'm asking you to leave." The request was not shouted. It did not need volume. Dion shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Trice stared at the floor. Her earlier composure dissolved. Celestine's face had gone pale beneath her careful makeup. "This isn't over," she said quietly, though the threat lacked its previous force. Amina did not respond. She stepped aside from the table, giving space to the documents rather than claiming it for herself. The guests began to move not toward confrontation. Conversations resumed in hushed fragments near the walls. A few phones lifted discreetly, screens glowing faintly in lowered hands. Information travels fastest in rooms like this. Jakari looked at the pages once more. 47,000 square feet, all adjoining land, sole ownership. The words did not bend for his disbelief. He swallowed. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Amina considered the question for a single, measured beat. "Clarity," she said. Mr. Harland snapped the folder closed with a soft, definitive sound. The click echoed lightly beneath the chandelier. The celebration had not ended with a raised voice. It had dissolved under documentation. Guests began retrieving coats. Cars were summoned. The music had long since been turned off. As the ballroom thinned, the marble floors reflected fewer silhouettes. Jakari remained standing at the center for a moment longer, the space around him widening with each departing guest. Amina did not linger to watch. She turned toward the front hall. The chandelier light caught briefly on the gold key at her throat as she passed beneath it. Behind her, her house exhaled. The house felt larger once the guests were gone. Sound carried differently. The echo of a closing door traveled farther down the hallway than it had during the party. The scent of champagne and perfume lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the cool polish of marble and cut flowers beginning to fade. By Monday morning, the phone began to ring. Not hers, his. Jakari stood near the kitchen island, staring at the screen as it vibrated against the stone surface. A name flashed. He answered quickly. "Hey," he said, forcing brightness into his tone. "About Saturday." The voice on the other end interrupted. Firm, professional, brief. He listened, his jaw tightened. "I think there's been some confusion," he replied, pacing now. "We're still in control of—" A pause. His expression shifted. "No, that's not necessary," he said quickly. "We can revisit this next quarter." The call ended. The phone vibrated again before he could set it down. Another contact. Another conversation. Shorter, this time. Meetings postponed, then quietly cancelled. Emails followed within the hour. Subject lines that once promised opportunity now read differently. Regretfully, after careful review, in light of recent developments, he refreshed his inbox twice, as if the language might correct itself. Across town, whispers traveled faster than formal statements. The story of stamped documents under chandelier light had already threaded its way through business circles that valued certainty above all else. Certainty had shifted. Monique lasted less than a week. On Thursday evening, Jakari returned to the guest suite late. Shoulders tight, tie loosened. He pushed the door open, expecting lamplight and music. The room was dark. He flipped the switch. The closet doors stood open, empty. The vanity surface had been cleared completely. No perfume bottles, no silk scarf, no careful arrangement of cosmetics. Even the red dress she had worn that night was gone. He walked into the bathroom. Drawers opened, closed. Nothing left behind. On the nightstand, A single indentation marked where a framed photograph had once rested. No note, no explanation. His phone lit up briefly with a notification from social media. He tapped it open. A photo posted hours earlier, Monique smiling somewhere unfamiliar. Caption, vague and polished. The comments beneath it had multiplied rapidly. Speculation, mockery, questions she did not answer. The post disappeared by morning. Silence followed. Celestine received formal correspondence 2 days later. The envelope arrived by certified mail. Signature required. She tore it open in the living room, hands less steady than she would have liked. The language was clear. Occupancy subject to review. Formal notice period. All gatherings suspended without written consent from the registered owner. Her mouth thinned into a hard line. She called Jakari immediately. "This is unacceptable," she said, pacing the length of the room. "You fix this." He stood near the window, looking out at the iron gate beyond the driveway. "I'm working on it," he replied, though the words carried no weight. "With what?" she snapped. "You don't even have standing." The accusation hung between them. Dion had been unusually quiet since Saturday. He had made calls of his own, attempting to preserve arrangements that had seemed solid only days before. Those calls ended much the same way: polite distance, sudden hesitations, certain assumptions about leverage no longer held. Trice adjusted her tone in public conversations, speaking less about plans and more about uncertainty. The shift was subtle but noticeable. The unit that had once operated with shared confidence now moved unevenly, each member recalculating independently. 3 weeks after the gathering, Jakari returned to the property alone. He did not drive the car he had once parked confidently beneath the porte-cochere. Instead, he approached on foot from the corner. Shoulders squared, but steps measured. The iron gate stood closed. A security guard stationed near the entry glanced up as he approached. "I need to see Amina," Jakari said. The guard's expression remained neutral. "I'll make a call." He stepped aside, speaking quietly into his radio. A brief exchange. A pause. He returned. "Miss Amina is unavailable." The phrase was delivered without inflection. Jakari glanced past him toward the driveway, curving out of sight. The grounds were unchanged. The facade of the house gleamed under afternoon light, just as it always had. Only context had shifted. "I can wait," he said. The guard nodded once and stepped back to his post. Jakari remained at the gate. Minutes passed. A breeze moved through the trees lining the fence, rustling leaves softly. A car drove by, at the far end of the street without slowing. He checked his phone. No new messages. He typed one anyway. "We need to talk." The message delivered. No reply. The gate did not move. After a long while, he exhaled sharply and stepped back from the iron bars. He turned and walked down the sidewalk, shoulders no longer squared. Behind him, the property remained silent and intact. Inside the house, nothing had been rearranged. Nothing needed to be. The foundation had never belonged to him. He was only now understanding that the ground he thought he stood on had always been borrowed. And borrowed ground does not hold when ownership shifts. The gate stayed closed. 6 months later, the mornings in Charlotte arrived without spectacle. Light crept slowly across the porch boards, warming the wood in quiet increments. The air carried the scent of damp grass and distant coffee. Somewhere down the block, a car door closed. A screen door followed with a soft clap. Amina sat in the chair her father had once favored. The paint along the armrest had worn thin in one corner from years of use. The cushion beneath her held the faint imprint of familiarity. Not memory, just habit. A ceramic mug rested between her palms. The coffee had gone from hot to warm without her noticing. The street beyond the yard stirred gently. A neighbor stepped out to retrieve a newspaper. A dog barked once, then settled. Charlotte did not rush. She had moved back gradually, not in retreat, not in recovery, in alignment. The estate office operated efficiently from a converted room inside the house, long wooden desk, organized files, a quiet hum from the laptop as financial reports refreshed. Harlan's team handled daily operations with practiced precision, forwarding documents for her review each week. She read them carefully. Properties in Atlanta, mixed-use developments in Texas, apartment complexes in the Midwest, each holding mapped in columns of numbers that no longer intimidated her. Her father had built patiently, methodically, without noise. She was learning the language of what he had made. In learning it, she was learning him again. There was grief in that, not sharp, not collapsing, steady, the kind that arrives not from absence alone, but from realization, from understanding the scale of love embedded in decisions made quietly years before. On the small table beside her chair sat a wooden box. She had found it in his study, tucked behind ledgers and old receipts bound neatly with twine. Inside lay two things, the gold pendant and a letter. She lifted the lid now. The pendant rested against dark velvet lining, its small key catching the early sunlight. She had removed it from around her neck weeks ago, not because she no longer valued it, but because the reminder had shifted. She did not need it in the same way. Her fingers brushed the edge of the folded paper beside it. The letter was dated the week after her wedding. The ink was steady, unmistakably his. "You will know when it's time, baby girl. You always have. I just made sure the door stayed open." She had read it enough times to know the rhythm of each sentence without looking. She folded it carefully along its original creases and placed it back in the box. Across the street, a child rode a bicycle slowly along the sidewalk, the faint click of gears audible in the morning air. Amina lifted her mug and took a sip. The coffee had cooled. The house behind her was quieter than the mansion had ever been. Fewer rooms, fewer polished surfaces, no chandeliers scattering artificial light, but the foundation felt deeper. She had not given interviews. She had not posted explanations. When acquaintances inquired carefully about the past months, she answered plainly. "It resolved," she would say, "nothing more." Some victories do not require narration. They require preservation. In the estate reports, she had begun redirecting a portion of profits toward community developments. Her father once supported quietly housing grants, educational initiatives, local businesses that needed steady backing rather than loud endorsement. She signed those approvals without ceremony. Money moved silently. Impact did not need performance. The chair beside her remained empty. She glanced at it, sometimes not with longing, but with acknowledgement. The absence had weight, but it did not hollow her. It grounded her. She set the mug down and leaned back, letting the morning expand around her. The porch boards creaked faintly as the sun climbed higher. A breeze shifted through the trees, carrying the rustle of leaves in soft rhythm. Power, she had learned, does not announce itself. It does not demand a room fall silent. It does not need to be believed to be real. It simply exists. She rose from the chair and lifted the wooden box, carrying it inside. The door closed behind her with a gentle click. On the porch, the empty chair remained in place. The street filled gradually with motion and ordinary sound, and in a modest house on a quiet street, a woman continued building without noise, steady, clear, and entirely her own. Power does not perform.